Back with Lori from Purposely Unplugged. How are you this month, Lori?
Fabulous. How are
Doing
you?
great, doing wonderful. I love the topic this month. We're sort of piggybacking about depression, and we're talking about finding balance in technology. Now, can you explain this to me?
Mhm.
What you're talking about?
Often with clients, Dave, I talk about finding balance with our screen time, with our telephone time, texting, Instagram, all these things. And the reason this links to depression is that the more time we spend on screens, we're decreasing the other things like connecting, going for walks, being physically active, and those things bring us joy. When we decrease our joy, there's the potential that we're increasing our depression. And unfortunately, screen time and media might be involved with that.
You had some interesting stats. Can you share those again?
Sure. The research around youth and cell phones was done between 2010 and 2015. It indicated that as young people had access to cell phones, because truly that's when we started giving them to our kids, that the suicide rate increased by 31% between 2010 and 2015.
What's the explanation for that? This just blows my mind.
Well, there can never be one explanation because each research piece takes it in a different direction. But as depression increases, as sense of connection with other people decreases, that risk of suicide increases. So even though we have access to more people through technology,
Right.
it's a more superficial connection. We have less physical, live interaction with those around us.
Wow, that is such an amazing stat. I never heard that one, but thank you for sharing that. And it puts things in perspective really quick, doesn't it? Like we
Mhm.
off air, you and I were talking about generations gone
Oh,
by
it does.
that you didn't have the technology, so you were. I don't want to say you were forced, but it was a joy again to communicate with other folks, right? You got out and you did that.
Mhm.
It's yeah, I
Mhm.
don't know where you
And
can
the
go
older
with that.
generation now, Dave, doesn't even have. Oh,
Go ahead.
well, and the older generation now, Dave, doesn't even have access to the technology that we have. Often, folks now that are older than us don't have cell phones or Facebook or Instagram, and we're actually removing them from our communication path, not deliberately, but because that's our main form of communication.
And with your practice, you always talk about how important that is when folks come to visit you. There is no cell phones. There is do you virtually see somebody after a couple sessions kind of looking forward to that? Like how to explain that impact because you're right there at ground zero. You're seeing when they have to put that phone down and leave it. Can people do it?
Mhm. Well, and absolutely. And honestly, people don't even bring their phone out of their car. Neither do I. So they know that it's a completely unplugged location, which means sometimes we talk too long, sometimes our time goes over, but that's just the fact that we don't have a clock that we're watching. And absolutely, I see clients completely relax knowing that their phone's not going to ting or bing, emails and calls aren't going to be coming through.
So with those stats that you're talking about and with what you're doing, the work that you're doing, let's talk a bit about that impact that you can make. Like when people are overwhelmed, like you said, and when we were talking about kids and suicide rates, can can parents reach out to you? Like, let's talk a little bit about how if I had a child, like, and I'm not an expert in that field, but what would the steps be?
Hmm. It's great for a family to reach out. And often, if a parent is concerned about their child, then I'll start the file with the child. I'll meet with the child. And parents need to know that this conversation is going to come up: overall wellness, joy, activity, physical activity, real friends, real connection. All of those things will be part of our conversation, as well as sleep, because cell phones and technology is affecting our sleep and our eating patterns as well.
And this is as a parent. Now, let's say if I had a child and let's say they were 13, 14 years old and I brought them to you, as a parent, am I allowed to get that information from you? What you talk about? And this is just off the cuff. I don't really know what the rules are. Or is that between you and the client, and that's where it stays? Do parents have to understand that?
It's between me and the client. So there is confidentiality for your client. But any parent can know strongly that I'm always looking at overall wellness, and I'm always looking at all aspects for that young person and what that looks like for them, regarding any mental health concern.
I want to ask you a question about your health, because when you see somebody that's younger and you help them and you see them getting better, talk about how that makes you feel.
It's spectacular. And honestly, I can have difficult conversations. Like, it's okay for your parents to determine that the internet gets turned off at 11 o'clock at night. And some young people just look at me with shock and horror. So I can deliver those messages, and no, they're not abusing you by the internet not being available after 11 o'clock at night. That's really not infringing on your rights.
It's interesting because sometimes the third voice is the one that resonates. You know what I mean? Two parents can say something till they're blue in their face, but hearing it from a different voice at a different location even might provide that incubus for that child or that person to think, oh, maybe I am overdoing this.
Mm-hmm. And I can realistically talk about the effect of screen time before bed, and that our brains really need that time to download and to unwind, and that stimulus is too strong. And I think the other note mention that parents need to be aware of is that I will indicate that parents need to be the role model here. We have to turn off our technology if we're going to expect the young people in our home to do the same thing.
And you just took me to my next point. Dealing with, I mean, you deal with folks of all ages. So dealing with adults that are having the same problem, is it the same criteria that you reach out to, or do you take a different philosophy on that?
No, it's still the same thing. We need to treat our bodies with that same respect and work with it the same way. We need to think about, how are we sleeping? How are we eating? What does our screen time look like? Are we finding joy? Are we connecting with other people in a way that helps us feed that need and meet that joy? And it's our values that are all underneath those kinds of concepts.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute. Lori, I can't put away my cell phone. I need it for work. Darn it. What are you going to say to me?
We live in a Canadian society, Dave. So if you are on call, and if your job requires that you're on call 24 hours a day for 7 days, when you become off call, then you have the right to set your life and to meet your life-work balance. And when you're finished your shift at the end of your day, you don't have to check your cell phone between the time your shift ends and the time that your next shift begins.
And it's a process with, like, the overstimulation part, just always using your technology. It just draws you further and further in, right? Like, I mean, I think folks probably started out using it as a tool. Now it's just, it has to be constant. It's a 24, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. To break free of that too, is it a baby step thing that you take with folks? Like, I mean, obviously if you come to your practice, like you said, you start with that initial hour without, it must take some time for people to understand that they don't need it all the time.
In my office, Dave, I can answer that. There's trees, there's birds, there's butterflies flying between us as we meet. There is enough to stimulate your awareness while you're with me. No one misses their cell phone. And as you were asking that question, I kind of was smiling, Dave. So I want to tell the listeners why I'm smiling. Sometimes the reason we're spending this much time on our phone is to avoid the things that are really bothering us, that are really on our mind. We're using this as an avoidance. So honestly, sometimes I say, so what are you avoiding? What's underneath all this?
There's always an undercurrent, isn't there? And that's usually the root of the problem, like you're talking about. There's something else going on too. Ah, boy, I could talk to you all day. I know you've got to go, you've got work to do, but I do appreciate you taking the time every month to sort of help folks, because I do think it makes a big impression, because they're hearing this and then they can give you a call. We should I want to give you a chance to give a quick plug too for your email and your website, because you are making an impact, and we need more people like you every day to tell us, okay, put it down. Go ahead. What's your website, your email?
Mm-hmm. purposefullyunplugged.com, and email is Lori at purposefullyunplugged.com, and my cell, reach out by phone, 226-934-7425.
Thanks, Lori. Have a great day and take care, okay?
I will. Bye.